This is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo. Unlike in our Thor podcast for Patreon, I remember to introduce Mulele.
Thank you.
I got off on a tangent talking about how I had not seen any Marvel movies since Iron Man 2, and I forgot I hadn't introduced my co-host. So, and it was hilarious to listen back to when I was editing it. Anyway, so more comics to critique this time. Let's start with Moderate Mania. This is by Charles Brandon Hayes and Randy Walker. I believe Hayes is the writer. And it's, according to the cover, it's about having bipolar disorder, or what used to be known as manic depression. I glanced at Wikipedia before we started recording. So it starts out with two guys outside a bar kind of chatting, and the guy's saying, yeah, things are going good. Well, except for some people dying recently, which is a little jarring. Yeah, he says, I can't believe I forgot about that. And then after that, I feel like it kind of jumps around a lot and started to feel like each page seemed to be almost kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
And I had trouble sort of fitting it together as a story. Like, next he's calling to his grandma while he's lying on his bed. And then we got a full page of grandma saying All in the Family is on, with a little bit of narration there. And the next page, he's looking in a mirror, but he's seeing himself upside down. And he's saying, stop it, stop it, stop it, shut up, just shut up.
Yeah.
And apparently I don't know very much about bipolar disorder. Apparently it could result in something like seeing yourself in the mirror upside down. And it just kind of goes on like this, and then suddenly it's over. It was quite short. And then the second half of the comic was the same comic in black and white, which I wasn't sure what to make of that. What did you think of it?
Well, the stop it, shut up part, the framing of it is in a Christmas ornament, which I thought was kind of curious.
Yeah.
But the artwork I like quite a bit. It's somewhere between, underground comics in the States and Mobius.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in there. Maybe there's a little bit of Beavis and Butthead thrown in. But the coloring in the first half of the comic, or the color part of the comic, is really garish and unsettling and a little bit hard to look at sometimes, but at the same time it's kind of effective in that it kind of agitates me just enough that maybe the point was to kind of induce the perspective of the writer or the artist in what they're feeling. I'm not entirely sure, but I thought the colors did work, but the first time I read through it, I did kind of feel like, oh God. And it could be just that the brightness on my computer is turned up too high. I gotta maybe if I were to see this printed, it would actually work a little bit better. But the black and white version I also liked. It was kind of interesting to see the contrast between the two. I do like the color version more than the black and white version. It is rather abrupt and it is rather disjointed, but there's something there. And and I could see this project going through more of this disjointedness for a longer span of time, number of pages, and actually kind of coming to some sort of coherent, the reader coming to some sort of coherent understanding of the project. There's merit here, but it's still in its infancy, and I would like to see more, really.
Yeah, I wanted it to be longer. I felt like I was just kind of starting to get what was happening, and then it was over.
Yeah, I had that feeling. Nice beginning. I'm intrigued. There were a couple of things I thought were like before the two guys talking. There's a little blurb on a yellow piece of on a yellow page. So page 3 in the PDF, where he starts to talk about when he was in high school, and he almost got his ass kicked for saying racist shit to a girl that he liked. And he says about the second or third sentence, I was falling in love with black and brown culture then, but was hella disrespectful. And I don't know how I feel about that exactly. Being a person of color, it kind of feels like he was exploring another culture rather than exploring a facet of his own culture. That there was a very clear separation between his race and people of color. And he was dipping his toe in like a day at the pool. And he could do or not do. And it kind of bugged me in what it implied about his, not only his understanding then, his understanding now, but I don't know, it could point to a larger problem, a kind of separation of people based on color in the States. I'm assuming this is from the States. But yeah, I did find it a little bit disturbing, just that one little bit. Yeah, and also the idea that if he was in fact falling in love with the culture, that he could be disrespectful. And he's kind of calling himself out, so I do appreciate that. But at the same time, yeah. But for the rest of the comic, I quite liked it. I want to see more.
Yeah, I would like to see more too, because I feel like he's trying to give an approximation of the feeling of being bipolar in how the comic progresses, but I kind of needed it to start to gel and kind of communicate more like this is what it's like, but it ended too soon.
Yeah. It definitely does. And the character, the I don't know, protagonist, for lack of a better word, is not quite identified, because we have a lot of characters and they all speak, and maybe one character begins to stand out and we begin to think, okay, maybe that's the writer, or maybe that is the main character, but we don't know for sure. There's no establishing kind of, okay, this is the guy.
I'm not even sure what his name is. I mean, maybe he's the writer. I suppose he's Charles, but it's not explained.
None of it is explained. But there is a lot of meat here in the things that they say, and even the layout of the pages in some cases. It is quite emotional. It is quite visceral. But yeah, I liked it. Can't say too much more about it because there's not that much there. But I want more.
Yeah. When you watched Batman as a kid, you enjoyed the colorful heroes and villains, the text sound effects on the screen, the thrill of watching a heroic crime fighter escaping from death traps and taking down bad guys. But the show was devised to interest adults too. What did you miss as a kid? Sexual innuendo.
The penguin's too small for me.
Closeted gay characters.
I like that cape, Batman.
Freudian death traps.
Has the giant clam really swallowed Robin?
Police incompetence.
Bruce Wayne is a millionaire playboy. Hardly a secret identity for Batman.
Whether you're a kid or an adult, there's something to like about our favorite Caped Crusader. Tim and Paul dig for the deeper meanings under the Batmania every other Thursday. What's the podcast's name?
To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles.
And we also have the Starfall Saga. This is story by Kostas Evagelidakis and art by Eris Saboriotis. I cannot pronounce it right. So obviously these are Greek names. And actually the email that this came with had Greek subject line, I think it was. There was some Greek there. This starts out, it's a post-apocalyptic world, as becomes clear later when they're talking about, like, once upon a time people could fly, and it shows a picture of a modern jet plane. But that's become kind of a mythical thing now, and wireless communication is like something that supposedly people could do in the past, but do you believe it or not? But now it's a world where there's some sort of sickness going around, and everyone is obligated to give blood through this machine, which goes to the 1%ers to save them from the sickness.
Yeah.
And I don't know, beyond that my first problem was that of course this is written by a non-native English speaker, but you could really tell because there were a lot of typos and bad grammar and so forth. And the first time I read it, I just had a hard time looking past that. So I had to go through it again and kind of just say, okay, it's like I'm reading something that my students wrote because it's by a non-native English speaker. So try to look past that. And the second time, I don't know, I was having trouble figuring out what the story was. It seemed like it was a lot of flashbacks, backstory and bloody fight scenes. And I don't know, some talking among the combatants, but I had trouble sort of identifying a plot line. How did you feel about it?
I only read 30 pages, or I should say maybe 32 pages. It was like the first issue. I read that and I was like, okay, I'm out. And the reason why is because the story, I had a lot of trouble identifying with the hero of the piece because basically he was an asshole. The setup.
Yeah, he's just as vicious as the bad guys. He cuts out somebody's tongue just kind of for the heck of it, and killing people, and yeah.
Even before that, he was just talking smack to everybody, and even the people around him were telling him that he was disrespectful. He's like, whatever, and I'm like, okay, surely there's going to be a growth arc here where he becomes a better person because he suddenly has to rely on people. But yeah, in the subsequent battle where, like you mentioned, he cuts off someone's tongue. It's like, okay, not only is he an asshole, he has no sympathy for people in general. What is there that is likable about this character? Am I looking at a villain or am I looking at a hero?
Yeah.
It really it makes no difference to me because we have the bad guys who are cruel and they steal blood from the poor for the rich. But we've got the good guys, supposedly good guys, I don't know, who kill anybody for beating up old men or cut out tongues for talking shit. Yeah, it just seemed kind of nonsense. And so the grammar and the spelling mistakes were a little bit jarring at first, but then I kind of got into it and began to read into the mistakes as a part of another culture and could kind of see it. It was okay. It was kind of becoming its own thing, its own language, in that there were a lot of Americanisms that were kind of misquoted or misused or just a little bit off. And after a while, I found it kind of okay to read. For me, the another part that I really couldn't deal with was the coloring.
Too garish.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And there are some things that I wanted to point out, technical aspects that kind of need to be fixed. First off, the font keeps switching between italicized and non-italicized words in the middle of sentences. Also, the space between lines increases or decreases. The size of the words increase or decrease. And all of these things are not good. I mean, you can do certain things like decrease the size of the font if you want to, I don't know, make someone seem far away or very quiet. But in this case, it just depended on, how much space they had on the page, I guess. But there were also some sound effects, like on page 7, where the only it's not a sound effect; it's actually a dialogue bubble where the guy says "stoop." Now I understand if he's supposed to have an elongated stop, but it doesn't work with this. Oh always means ooh, and so it becomes stoop.
Yeah.
Stoop.
Stoop. Yeah, which is a different word. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so that kind of confusion is not good. But later I saw a sound effect where the sound effect actually covered the action. It completely obliterated the picture. Page number 18. Where the hero of the piece is fighting his master or his trainer, and there's this
that blam.
Yeah, that covers the picture entirely, so you can't actually see what's happening. That is one of the worst no-nos of comics. Never cover the action.
Yeah.
And I can understand looking at it that, okay, what it's supposed to be is a light fixture falling onto the master and kind of pinning him down. But Yeah. Also, the blam is the brightest thing on the page.
Mhm.
It's red lettering over a bright kind of neon yellow um, sound effect balloon, and yeah, it pains my eyes to look. So I
Um,
have to look away.
the one that kind of got me was on page 10 where the guy jumps over the wall when he lands. The sound effect is crap.
Yeah, yeah, that was good. I did like that one.
It just occurred to me. Well, I mean, until just a couple of minutes ago, I was thinking that that must have been dialogue. Someone must have been saying crap because he got away. But no, that is really apparently the sound of him landing. Apparently, the writer didn't know. Which, I mean, there's plenty of profanity in here. He must have known what a mild profanity like crap means. Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, but see, at that point, it starts to become some sort of bizarro camp where things don't quite make sense, and you understand that you are dealing with a non-native speaker, but some of it is just so incredulous. It's like he must know. He must realize this one.
And the crap also covers up his leg so that the leg looks all kind of misshapen. I had to look at that picture for a while to figure out exactly what I was looking at.
Yeah, there's a lot of like false fisheye stuff here, and sometimes it gets a little too weird. Um, so sometimes the body becomes quite uh, disorientated, disjointed. It doesn't quite work because it doesn't have that like Kirby style pointing at the camera or something like that, but it has like one foot is forward, the other foot is back, and the foot that's back, something's got like Popeye legs. um, so yeah, it gets kind of wonky there, but yeah, the sound effect crap covering his feet. I guess the artist didn't like the way he drew feet.
That could be.
Um,
Maybe that was the artist's reaction to how he had drawn the feet. Oh crap! So he just cover them up.
yeah. So I mean, in the artist has talent. The artist has worked very hard. You can see it
Mm-hmm.
in how much he's put into this. You can see the time, but his understanding of perspective, placement, composition are still a little bit rudimentary. So needs a little bit of work on that. But yeah, the coloring here, if it's red, it's bright red. Sometimes a little bit darker red, but still it's just red. None of the colors mix or blend, so everything stands out way too much.
Mm.
And yeah, there's a lot of like neon and fire in a lot of the costuming, and color-wise, it just doesn't work. But hopefully, in the next, I don't know, one or two projects that he does, he'll be able to focus on that and actually fix a lot of those things. But yeah, it is kind of missing a little bit of that knowledge base.
Yeah. Another thing, and it seems like we bring this up for like every third comic, but word balloon placement. I had a lot of trouble. There was one page in particular, I can't locate it right now, where a word balloon ran way down over the row below it, and I was really having trouble figuring out which way my eye was supposed to go. I'm looking right now at page 11 where when the guy who had jumped over the wall and landed with a crap goes down the manhole, and then the guy who's waiting for him there covers the manhole and pulls this kind of vendor table over the manhole. So in those two panels, as he's lifting, he says, "Gmph." And he's saying it in both panels, and the word balloon has pointers from both panels, and it looks like, that's comics language for two people saying the same thing rather than the same person saying it twice. So it looks like his twin is over there in the next panel also saying it or something. I thought he really needed to have separate word balloons for those two panels.
Well, conceptually, there is a third option here. That his gmf is actually traveling through time.
Okay.
Or is just omnipresent. So I guess 4 options. But the first action, he's lowering the manhole cover, and the second action, he's pulling a vendor's table over the manhole. Mind you, this person is blind. So when he calls him from far away, "Come on, hurry up," he seems somehow aware that this person is running towards him.
Well, or else he's faking the blindness. I'm not sure. That was my take on it, but I might be wrong.
Well, he's got a blind man's cane. So that's kind of a long con.
Mm-hmm. Well, his eyes do appear to be blind when the guards approach him. So,
well, if he is in fact blind, then how does he know that the guy's running towards him?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess that was why I felt like he was really sighted, because that was the only explanation I could come up with for that.
It kind of reminds me of that old lady in The Life of Brian. Every time the Romans knock on the door, it's like, "My back is old and my legs are tired," and walks towards the door. And you don't remember this? Not at all?
It's been a long time since I saw that.
Yeah, I saw it a little bit more recently. But anyway, yeah, it's one of those things where she was there just to kind of provide cover for the, what is it? The something agnostic front.
Oh,
or the People's Agnostic Liberation Front or something like that. I forget the name of their organization. But anyway, yeah, she was the cover for them. And so every time the Romans knocked on the door, she would walk to the door slowly while they hid and then pretend to be an old woman who didn't know what was going on. But anyway, it's an old gag. It was old before Monty Python did it. But anyhow, yeah, this a little weird, a little weird. And I would say also one last thing about the action in this. Mm-hmm. It's cruel for the spectacle of it, and there's nothing compelling about that.
Yeah, I think it seemed like it was really reveling in the bloody fights and people being mean to each other, and that was kind of the story.
Yeah. And also, there seems to be no, or at least not in the first issue, what does the good guy want? What is he training for?
Yeah.
Just a badass ass kicker, and he trains for it because that's who he is. That's who his father was before him, but he doesn't care because his father is so lame he died.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just seems to be a world without purpose, and except to be cruel to everyone around you, which I didn't enjoy that much.
Those are our comics this time. If you'd like us to critique your comics, send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and we'll read at least 30 pages and critique it on the show. So we've got our own Patreon podcast on the Deconstructed Comics Patreon page about Marvel movies. So I don't know if we want to talk about Marvel movies on Critiquing Comics now.
Well, it's kind of curious to watch Marvel do this thing, and I don't mind talking about it because I love movies. Some people would say I love movies more than comics. It's not true. I just love movies more than other people's comics. I love my comics more than movies. That's the way it goes. But still, I find it curious that, you haven't watched any of these films, and I've watched all of them, and kind of seeing you kind of work your way through them, it's curious for me.
Curious. What do you mean?
Well, there's a vicarious thrill because I know what's coming, but also I'm kind of analyzing your reaction to these things, having seen the end of it all, or at least up until Endgame, and you being pretty much in the dark about it.
Yep.
I mean, you may know a couple of spoilers, but
yeah, I mean, I know. All I know is, my brother's explanation of the during the scene during the credits of Captain Marvel about, he filled me in a little bit on what happened to the Avengers, like, oh, they turned to dust, okay, because of what's his name, Thanos.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about all I know.
Yeah. Apparently, all of this was already told in the comics, the original comics that this is based off of. But from what I understand in the comics, Thanos has the hots for death.
Yeah, that's right.
Wants to impress her, so he's going to collect all these stones and kill half the universe just to get laid.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, which that's got to be some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard. But at the same time, people have kind of looked at the idea of what Thanos' plan is in the movies and said, that's also kind of dumb. So I don't know what to say, but I did enjoy these movies, and I enjoyed the architecture of what they did. A little bit more than the stories themselves, although I did appreciate all the callbacks and all the other shit that they do by connecting all of these movies together, and seeing the overall arc of the characters and how they manage them through time. It was brilliant, even if there were some things that I disagreed with or some parts that I thought were a little bit sloppy in their execution. It was an amazing plan that worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're finally going. I'm finally going down that road. So eventually, maybe we'll do it quickly enough that we can catch up with them at some point.
Well, Spider-Man's coming out.
Yeah, they just keep putting them out.
Well, this is the last one for a bit. They're going to a little bit of a break, but apparently this Spider-Man film has a lot of stuff to do with the Avengers Endgame. So I would recommend for you, Tim, do not look at any of the commercials. There's spoilers in that.
Okay, well, I never see the commercials anyway. I'm not a trailer watcher, so
that's totally fine. But on that note of watching these quick enough to catch up, when are we going to watch the next one?
Well, so as we're recording, as I mentioned to you before, a week from tomorrow, I'm going to watch Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yeah.
So shortly after this Critiquing Comics goes up, we'll be putting that Captain America review on Patreon. So,
any chance I can convince you to do a double feature?
Depends on what else I have going on. What would be the next one after Captain America?
Hold on, I got the list up here. So after the first Captain America,
yeah,
After Captain America comes Marvel's The Avengers, the first.
Straight into Avengers. Okay, that's the end of phase 1, isn't it?
That's the end of phase 1, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's see what I can do. But yeah, I mean, we'll get to that pretty soon, at the least.
All we need to do is like one phase a week. It means that the third phase, there are 10 movies. But...
yeah, don't hold your breath.
Yeah. Well, anyway, man, that third phase is really huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can work out a double feature, let me know in advance so I can catch up.
Okay.
Even though I've seen all these films, I am watching each one so I can talk about it in detail with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, we're still 8 years behind on the theatrical releases, so...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anything else before we go?
Believe it or not, no.
Okay, great. So, until next time, this is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics. As always, the comics we talked about in this episode are linked from the show notes. To get our Patreon podcast, Tim Catches Up with the MCU, and more patron-only content, go to patreon.com/deconcomics and support us for at least $4 a month. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, Coom, Sam, and Rob discuss the first Wolverine miniseries from 1982 by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. See you then.